Good evening, Steeler fans. Welcome to the Curtain Call. I'm Geoffrey Benedict. Shannon White is not here with me as usual. He is actually, they had a family emergency. So make sure you remember him in your thoughts. From what I don't know the nature of it, but I know he had to go to a hospital. So just all our best wishes are with him. With me in his stead, Andrew Wilbar. Andrew, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing well, ready to talk some Steelers football. Only one day away from actual football.
Right? Craziness. Absolute craziness. It feels to me like the offseason dragged on and then training camp hit and it's just flown. Does it feel that way? Does it feel that way for you this year?
I think it does, and I think a lot of it's just because we have like a month and a half of absolutely nothing going on, and then we see updates each and every day coming out. It's like, why can't this be spread out throughout the whole summer where we won't get overwhelmed right at the beginning of everything, but we can just, have a full calendar of NFL football activities. But it's a good time of year.
Yeah, and the last two seasons we have had like nothing to talk about. Because it's all speculation. It's like someone says they might have seen something at a practice, and you're like, if they can't verify it. And we were run off that. So having training camp back, it's been great. But man, that's crazy. This is actually, speaking of football returning, this is the season finale. This is the end of the curtain call for the year. After this show, next Wednesday when we come back, when hopefully Shannon's back with me, it'll be Know Your Enemy, and we'll be talking about preseason opponents. We'll be talking about who the Steelers will be facing. So this is our wrap-up of the offseason. Andrew's here with me, and we're going to today go through the Steelers position groups and rank them in the AFC North. We're going to go through all of them and say, where do the Steelers rank right now in the AFC North at all the different position groups? And maybe at the end, we'll see where we think they are, where they're going to end up. We'll get some predictions where they're going to end up in the division this year. It's going to be a fun show. Andrew, let's start it off with you. Tell us about the AFC North quarterbacks. Where do you think the Steelers, with their quarterbacks, fit in the AFC North?
Are we doing anything in terms of Deshaun Watson? Are we just kind of considering him as
the whole? I would say consider the whole situation. We don't know what's going on with it, and do your best.
So the whole, I'm going to say I would go. We have, it's so tough because you have so many teams that were in a state of transition a couple years ago, and now you have us in that same state. So I would go. Yeah. I would say the Steelers. I'm going to put us fourth for now, just especially knowing now that Deshaun Watson more than likely is going to be seeing some time playing this year. And I would probably put. Sorry, I got distracted for a second. I would put Baltimore third, Cleveland 2, knowing that Watson is out for some time, and then I would put Cincinnati 1 with a healthy Joe Burrow. I give him a slight edge.
Yeah, I also have Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals at the top of the quarterback rankings. I'm going to Ravens second.
Okay.
Steelers third, and I'm putting the Browns fourth.
Okay.
I think Deshaun Watson, a year off, come to the AFC North where he has not played well in the past. And the suspension thing, I think there's going to be some issues there. I think there's going to be some growing pains. Could be wrong. We'll see, but I don't think that's going to work out well. And I've got one main reason. I've got a thing completely away from all the other stuff. Reason why I think Deshaun Watson's not going to be the best quarterback in Cleveland. Cleveland is a hard place to play. The culture, it's a fan base is very hard. They turn negative very quickly. It's a tough place to play. Baker Mayfield succeeded there partly because he had that arrogance. No matter what happened, he didn't care. He's like, screw you. We're going to go out there and stick our foot in your rear. That was kind of Mace. That was kind of I always called him Mason Rudolph. That was Baker Mayfield's thing. I don't think Deshaun Watson fits that. And furthermore, Deshaun Watson is playing for a team he didn't want to play for. He rejected the team straight out, and they came back and offered him enough money to convince him otherwise. But if he's there playing for the money and he's got all this stuff and the fans are quick to turn on, if things start rocky and the fans kind of turn on him, I could see Deshaun Watson's tenure in Cleveland not starting well at all. So I have the Browns 4th, Steelers 3rd, Bengals obviously at the top. Running backs, Andrew. I think this one's one of the easier ones to pick. Where do you have the running backs ranked?
I'm going to put the Steelers. I'm going to put us second, barely behind, or just ahead of the Bengals, who I have third with Joe Mixon. I think the Steelers' depth is slightly better than Cincinnati's currently. Never been a big Samaje Perine fan. Michigan guy, not a Chris Evans guy. But I mean, the Browns have to be number one, I think, just with both Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt, and really Dearness Johnson as well has become a really nice complement to what they have in Chubb and Hunt. So, really, if the Browns were to even go and say, hey, we can get along fine without Kareem Hunt, we're going to trade him to another team, a contender that needs a running back, maybe at the trade deadline, I think they'd still be number one just with Chubb and Dearness Johnson, followed by Najee with the Steelers. And then just not knowing Baltimore's situation with Dobbins coming back from the injury, Mike Davis, who's coming off a bad year. I just don't know about the Ravens running back situation. I mean, if you want to count Lamar Jackson as a running back, then that changes things. But yeah.
Yeah. Oh, no, I have the exact same ranking. Browns, Steelers, then Bengals, then Ravens. And I also was sitting there with the Bengals and Steelers being like, that's a really close call. I'm giving the edge to Najee. I think he's a better overall running back even than Mixon. But here's a question I got for you. Dearness Johnson, he's the 3rd string running back for the Browns. Is there another team in the AFC North that has 2 running backs better than him?
No.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, if he was their second, he wouldn't just be like a good back. He'd still be the best backup running back in the AFC North right now. So the Browns, to me, they've got the top number 1 back. They've got behind that, of the starting backs, Chubb's number 1 for me. And then they've got the 2 best reserves.
Would you say that Kareem Hunt would be an upgrade over what, like, let's say Baltimore has right now with J.K. Dobbins?
Oh, yeah, I think Kareem Hunt would be their number 1 guy. Like, honestly, in that offense, he'd be fantastic. Like, he would really fit that well. Yeah, I'd take him over them. Yeah. So they've got, oh my goodness, they've got the best running back room. We'll just go with that. Browns have by far the best running back room. Steelers second, though, with Najee Harris and what looks like some depth coming up this year. Hopefully. Tight ends. Where do you have the Steelers tight ends with Pat Freiermuth? Where do you put Pat Freiermuth and Zach Gentry, our Michigan guy?
The Michigan guy that neither of us really liked coming out.
Both of us thought were terrible. We were like, oh, this guy's the worst.
I don't even know if I had that guy ranked. Out of all the guys that I rank every year for the draft, I don't even think I cared enough to rank the guy. But he is by far outdone any expectation I had for him. But I would put the Steelers. I'm high enough on Freiermuth to put the Steelers second. I think Baltimore has to be first with Mark Andrews. None of the teams in the AFC North have a ton of depth at tight end, really. But with Cincinnati, they have several young pieces. Trying to look, Hayden Hurst, that was the guy they added this offseason. Sample's more of a blocker. They have okay depth, but Hurst he has not become what the Ravens thought he was going to be when they drafted him in the first round. I would put the Steelers second. Then probably I would put Cleveland third with a mixture of Harrison Bryant and David Njoku. I'm a little bit more confident in that than I am Hurst and Sample, so I'd have to put the Bengals last.
Yeah, I'd agree with you there. I agree with you. I was flip-flopping the Browns and Bengals, and I was telling you before the show, like almost I realized after I'd made my list, almost all the close calls that involved the Browns, I put the Browns. Mm-hmm. I dropped the Browns every time. Yeah. So when I just looking at my list here, I have the Browns as by far the worst team in the division, and I don't think that's the case. I think I'm that's a little hatred, a little personal anything there for me. But yeah, it's hard to go against the Ravens and tight ends. They constantly have good tight ends. Like reading what they're saying about Hayden Hurst in Cincinnati, they're like, this is the best tight end we've had in a while. And I'm like, wow, this is the guy Baltimore was like, yeah, we can get rid of this guy. He's not a big deal. So I do have the Ravens first. They always have a good group. Steelers second. And man, I want to put the Steelers up there with the Ravens. I'm so high on this tight end group. I think this tight end group with the addition of Connor Hayward and as good as Zach Gentry has become, love that tight end room, but you can't put them ahead of Mark Andrews and Nick Boyle and those guys, what they do with the Ravens. I have the Bengals and Browns pretty much even at the bottom, but you can flip it either way. I'd be okay with it. That takes us through quarterback, running back, tight end. Let's go to wide receivers.
It is so difficult because you have so much youth at the position with literally every team in the AFC North outside of maybe the Browns, and they have some young pieces as well. I think you have to put Cincinnati first for sure. Higgins, Chase, Boyd, they're the best threesome in the league by far. And after that, I would put the Steelers second. I like the talent in the room. If Chase Claypool if he has a different role where he can play more out of the slot, use his physicality in a different way where he's not having to be a vertical threat. Because I know he ran a good 40 time, but he on tape, even coming out of college, like I thought he was going to run like a 4.6 or something because he wasn't used like that at Notre Dame. He was just a possession guy who was going to be a red zone monster, a third down monster, would come down with those contested catches. He was not really a deep threat per se. Deontay, I'm not his biggest fan, but he gets open, and that's important for a young quarterback. And obviously, what do you think of the role that Calvin Austin's going to play? Pickens is getting a lot of the attention. He's going to have a big role, but what do you think Austin's role is in year one?
That's the crazy one to me is where they're going to use him because they kind of have that natural set already where you've got Deontay Johnson at the X. He's going to play there 80% of the time. Chase Claypool is your number 2. He's going to be on the other side, he's going to be on the strong side. When they go 3 receivers, Pickens goes outside of him. He slides into the slot. It makes sense. That's a lot of size together there. That's really nice. And then Calvin Austin the third, it's kind of hard to fit him in there, like in a trips package. Yeah, that works. You can put him outside on a trips package and have that threat of screens, have the threat of little loop routes, whatever you want to do with him. I think he is going to have a harder time working his way, and I think you are going to see him in more of a gimmicky kind of a role, not necessarily line up in the backfield and doing reverses and that stuff exclusively, but his routes are not going to be just, normal plug him in and he's going to run the route tree. I don't think they're going to do that with him early. It will be interesting to see, and I'm very interested in seeing if he gets more snaps or Anthony Miller or Miles Boykin or any of these guys. Cody White's been playing a lot.
Steven Sims.
In camp. Yeah, Steven Sims. A lot of potential there. It's gonna be interesting, but those top 3 are pretty locked in, and there's a lot of depth. So yeah, for me, I have the Steelers number 2, obviously Bengals number 1. I went Browns number 3, largely on the basis of Amari Cooper. Did you get through all of yours? Or you stopped asking?
We knew the Ravens were going to be last. So.
Yeah, the Ravens are last because do they actually have a wide receiver?
If you want to call Rashad Bateman a sure thing, yeah, it's that. Yeah, they've got nobody. At least with the Browns, I don't want to plug too many Michigan guys in one show, but Donovan Peoples-Jones, I was wanting the Steelers to draft him later in the draft because
me too.
Michigan did not use him well at all and stuff. The Steelers, when Michigan had, you had Tariq Black, you had Nico Collins, you had DPJ and stuff. DPJ was the one when Black was healthy. He just got lost in the shuffle completely. His best value was coming on punt returns. He is a very talented receiver. He was just as highly touted coming out as Jerry Jeudy was. And, I think he's in a good situation in Cleveland. He's going to get decent volume. And if Deshaun Watson's the quarterback, I think he has a chance to break out this year as a good wide receiver too.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the Browns, they have some serious upside there, but I don't think they rival the Steelers yet.
Right.
And obviously, has any team put less investment into wide receiver than the Ravens since they drafted Lamar Jackson? Like, they drafted a young quarterback and was like, we got a young quarterback. We don't need receivers.
Yeah. Sounds like what the sounds like what the Bears are doing with Justin Fields.
Yeah, they're like, oh, you go out there and you don't need receivers. No wonder everyone says like Lamar Jackson can't throw. For one reason, he doesn't have any receivers to throw to. Like, you've got to make it happen. I guess we'll see. One of the great things of this season is Marquise Brown going to Arizona. We're going to get to see if Marquise Brown is good and Lamar Jackson isn't. We're going to get to kind of see that dynamic there play out.
Yeah.
Well, let's move on to defense. If you want, I can go first for defense since I put you on the spot, made you go first for all of offense.
Where do you rate the offensive lines?
Oh, offensive lines, man. God, skipping the offensive lines. Yes. Right. Go ahead. You want to take offensive lines here, and then I'll go first for defense.
Sure.
Okay.
I'm going to put the Steelers fourth. The Steelers and I just have a lot of philosophical disagreements, and one of them is offensive tackle. And I wish more would be invested into. I'd love to see what the offensive line could be. A Steelers offensive line could be if the Steelers just tried emphasizing, trying to find an elite left tackle. And the Steelers have never really, and I know in my lifetime I've never had an elite left tackle. I know there's only a select few in the NFL. But I would love to see what a Steelers line would look like if it was built from the outside. I know that's not the way the Steelers do, but I'd just like to see what it would be like. I think I'm putting the Browns first. I would be tempted it's going to take time to gel, but the Bengals add a lot of nice pieces of their offensive line this year. If La'el Collins can stay healthy, he's going to solidify that offensive line a lot as well. And I'd probably put Baltimore 3. I would go Cleveland 1, Cincinnati 2, Baltimore 3, Steelers 4.
I have same exact lineup until those Browns offensive linemen fall apart. They got the best line. Like, that group is very similar to the Steelers group where you've got enough similar age. They've got a few years left in them before you have to worry about that group falling off. Bengals did put a little bit of work into their line. We'll see how that turns out. Ravens, I struggle with this one because I think the Steelers can be better than the Ravens offensive line. That's not high praise, right? That's not the highest of praise. The Ravens and Steelers do not have the best offensive lines in the NFL. But for now, I'm going to have to go Steelers fourth just because of how bad that group was last year. I like the additions of Daniels and Cole, but neither of those guys. I kind of feel like we started off with, well, these guys are clear upgrades over what we had last season, which is true. They're going to be better than, the guys we trotted out, the multiple people we trotted out at center that weren't good. They're going to be better than Trey Turner. Like, James Daniel and Mason Cole are going to be better than those guys. But I think over time it's become like, oh, they're going to anchor this line. Like, how they're the best guys. They're good, and we just keep our expectations keep going up for them. They're not. This isn't David DeCastro, right? This isn't Marquise, but we have not added a star lineman to this team. We just improved, and hopefully enough to be a mediocre middle of the road line. Because if we're there and the team can force the defense to stop, overloading the box, then we'll be in much, much better shape than we've been the last couple of seasons. But I'm not low on this offensive line. But I'm also not high on them. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Looking at defense, I'll go ahead and take the reins on this one. If you look at the defensive line, interior defensive line, right? I'm gonna go Ravens first. This is one that to me is very close. There's a lot of talent out there. I think Cameron Hayward's the best defensive lineman in the division. I don't think there's really a discussion to be had on that. But the Ravens, with Calais Campbell, the rookie Travis Jones, who I was a big fan of, and he looks good so far in their camp. I think they are the more well-rounded group. I think the Steelers could be better, but with what the Steelers did last year, I'm not putting too much stock in them being better than the Ravens depth-wise across the board. So I'm going to go Steelers 2. Bengals have got to put it together, but they've got talent on that defensive line too. I put them 3. And the Browns, I'm putting the Browns 4th. None of these teams, though, are like that bad on the defensive line. The main reason I put the Steelers ahead of the Bengals is you flip Larry Ogunjobi from the Bengals. He played great for them. He's now a Steeler. Steelers get some guys back. It's not enough to overtake the Ravens in my opinion yet, but I think the Steelers are above the Bengals and the Browns come in last place. Partly because that game we played against the Browns last season, we won the Week 17 Browns game because J.C. Hassenauer and John LeGlue were pushing their interior defensive line all over the place. They were just bullying them. And if J.C. Hassenauer and John LeGlue are bullying your defensive interior, you're in bad shape. And they didn't do a ton to address it. So that the Browns to me are the worst there. What do you have, Andrew?
I'm actually putting the Steelers first. With the addition of Ogunjobi, if Alualu is a big question mark, obviously, but I like the depth behind him. I love Montravius Adams. Loudermilk has kind of shut me up about a lot that I said about him when he came out. I've had to drop the Milk Dud nickname. I've had to do a lot with him. But Cam Hayward is just an absolute beast. He is so fun to watch on the field. I would put Baltimore 2 really because of Travis Jones. Justin Madubuike hasn't quite lived up to expectations so far, but he's still young. He's provided good depth for them. Campbell, he hasn't fallen off a complete cliff yet. He's obviously not the player he was several years ago, but still a very nice piece they have there. And I would as well put Cincinnati 3rd and the Bengals 4th. The Bengals, just looking at them on paper, I mean, they've got 3 rookies that are probably going to make the team. Glenn Logan, I liked coming out of LSU as a late-round pick, but not if he's going to be seeing any significant snaps in year 1. And Perry and Winfrey's tape was so frustrating in college, so frustrating. He'd go games not doing absolutely anything. He'd just get pushed off the ball. Almost, I got the impression of sometimes when he just almost felt careless about the game, like he was not giving his full effort. And then he just turned on a totally new level toward the end of last year, and then into the scouting combine where he blew everyone away with his athleticism. I mean, he had maybe the best offseason pre-draft process of any. Well, you can make the argument for maybe even any defensive player. And his draft stock still hurt because of his inconsistent tape, but it's all unknowns really with them. Tommy Togiai, same thing. Taven Bryan, he was a bust, and just kind of another piece. They just have a bunch of guys they've just added. They're just hoping that a couple of them break out and emerge, but there's nothing proven there.
Can't disagree with you there. Going on to edge rushers, I have Steelers number 1, Browns number 2. Jadeveon Clowney is a guy who can pick up some sacks, but he's mostly a run defender. Alex Highsmith gives you that same thing, and T.J. Watt is, in my opinion, a significant upgrade on Myles Garrett. He is just better, gives you much more consistent effort, and a ton more of splash plays and production, which apparently don't matter as much as, a slightly higher pressure rate to a lot of the NFL. But to me, TJ Watt is the story there. The Browns have 2 really good defensive ends, but I'm putting the Steelers first. So Steelers, Browns. Then I'm going to go Bengals with I just lost the name of their guy. Trey Hendrickson is one of them. Hubbard, yeah, Sam Hubbard. He's the other guy. They've got quality there. I'm going to put the Ravens last, even though the Ravens got good people. Like the edge rusher position is one that's very strong in the AFC North, and for the Steelers, it's going to be interesting. I mean, the Steelers don't have the greatest tackles. They're bringing back the guys they had last year. And it's going to be interesting to watch.
Yeah, I can't necessarily disagree. I would go with Steelers 1 for sure. I would probably put the Bengals number 2 only because I really like Joseph Osai and his potential. Because I know Steve Hubbard is not necessarily a guy they use on every down all the time. I think Osai is a piece who could really develop and become a starter once their 2 guys go off the scene. And then, see, I'm not a Clowney fan at all. He's a good run defender and stuff, but I don't like the inconsistent play, the inconsistent effort. I'll put the Browns 3rd barely, but man, in the words of Gus Johnson, oh, job, oh, man, if David Ojabo, if he can, once he gets healthy, man, that is going to be a good unit. I mean, he's got so much talent. He's got great bend around the edge. For someone who hasn't played football that long, I mean, he picked up on the game really, really quickly. I love his aggressiveness. I mean, every time he's going after that ball, that's the first thing. That is what his mind is on. He's not just going to hit somebody. He's going straight for the ball. Justin Houston is what he is at this point, but away, still developing. But I believe they have the pieces there to, at this time next year, it wouldn't shock me if we're talking about them as the second or maybe even the top one if they live up to their full potential.
Wow. Couple of things. I know you're high on Ojabo. But I'm surprised you're putting Hubbard, Hendrickson,
and Osai
ahead of Garrett and Clowney.
Garrett, I love. Now, I don't love him at all. I love his game, not him.
But
Clowney. How old is Clowney? I need to look this up. I have the Ravens roster up right now. Clowney is what? Only 29 still. I guess maybe it's just because he's one of those guys I was never incredibly high on, and maybe I just need to kind of get off of the anti-Clowney train. But I did not like his effort in Houston. I just felt like he was always a little bit on the overrated side. And they don't have any depth. They really don't have that much depth behind him. Just looking at their depth chart, Isaiah Thomas is a guy who could develop into something. Curtis Weaver, Stephen Weatherly. I mean, Chase Winovich. Chase Winovich is the one glimmer of hope that I'll give them. How many Michigan guys have we talked about so far? We talked about like 6.
I know. Every time you come to a Michigan guy, you're like, well, this guy.
Well, I need to reconsider it now. This is much better now.
Oh man,
I'm gonna stick with what I have, but I mean it's close.
Yeah,
I really do like Joseph Osai, and I like his potential that he brings. I think if he takes that next step this year, the Bengals have 3 edge rushers that I think they can rely on to give them quality snaps.
Yeah. See, I'm not a huge Clowney fan either. I would put him slightly ahead of Alex Highsmith. But that's it. That's really the extent of where I'd go. I thought, like, if you take Bud Dupree's last season with the Steelers, I thought he was better than Clowney at that point. And he's just not. There's guys like Clowney that when he's the number one guy, he vanishes. Just like a Bud Dupree. When Bud Dupree was the guy, you're not going to get much from him. When there's other people drawing attention and they can just play, suddenly they start showing up with that athleticism. Because if they can get a win, they're on the quarterback, they're on the play that quickly. But I don't think they're great players. I think Clowney's highly overrated. When people consider him to be great, which is not a small number of people think he's really, really good. Mm-hmm. Next group is the one I've been dreading here: inside linebackers. This is all over the place. None of these groups really have established guys where you can sit there and say this is a top linebacker, but none of them. But they all the teams have talented guys that are inconsistent. Steelers are hoping to see Myles Jack get back to form from when he was on a good defense. I think he's the best bet of these to be like the clear best inside linebacker in the division. I think Miles Jack is the best bet for that. So I have the Steelers at inside linebacker number 1. It's a very close matchup for me because again, there's no one really stands out as being clearly great here. I went with the Ravens second. They've got a lot of talent. They've got some veteran presence. They've got a good mixture. They haven't really put it together very well. Obviously, Patrick Queen is kind of a bit all over the place. You got guys like Josh Bynes. You've got different players, but you don't have anything great there. You don't have anything really great, but you've got enough players to be pretty good. I'm going to go Bengals third, and I'm going to go Browns fourth for inside linebackers. I'm not sold on any of their even JOK, like even Joker. I don't. I should give his actual name, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah.
Yeah.
He's got talent, but again, like a Patrick Queen, like when are we going to see that show up consistently? So I'm going to go Steelers number 1, then Ravens, then Bengals, then Browns, in a tight mash mangled together with none of them really standing out. Where are you on that?
I'm not impressed with any of the rooms. I'm going to put the Steelers 1 only because of the talent I believe is better overall. I have concerns about how well Miles Jack and Devin Bush will play together, just because they don't complement each other well. Neither of them are excellent run defenders. I'm concerned about how well the Steelers are going to be able to plug up the run in the middle. But man, if Devin Bush, another Michigan player, if maybe I should just talk about Miles Jack then instead. I mean, Jack seems, and you've talked about how, he could be kind of like that hybrid defender that Flores can kind of move around. I think he's a good fit, and I think Bush is a good fit as well. For what Flores does, if Flores can just ingrain in him more discipline in the head, I don't think Bush has lost the talent, and I still believe that last year he was somewhat hampered by the injury. It usually takes 2 years to fully recover from an ACL tear. And I think that we will see better in time this year from him. So that's why I put us first, just because of the potential. After that, oh, man. Yeah, this is not a good division for inside linebackers.
It really isn't.
You have
we went from a lot of strength and a lot of depth at edge rushers to inside linebacker. You're sitting there looking at me like, who do you even have? Like,
any of these edge guys want to play inside linebacker and see how it works
really
out? I'm gonna put the Bengals second because I do like Logan Wilson. He's shown a lot of development.
He's solid.
Jermaine Pratt's he's kind of a hybrid inside outside guy. They move him around some, but I did like Pratt coming out. To Gray Scales, we've got to give them some credit for Scales. I mean, that totally puts him on the top. Akeem Davis-Gaither, Marcus Bailey. I will say that at least that age is on their side. The players they have not reached their climax, and I'll give them that. Whereas with Baltimore, they have Patrick Queen. When he's at his best, I mean, you can make an argument he's the best linebacker in the division. But after him, Malik Harrison, Josh Ross, Jacoby McLean, and Josh Bynes. That's what they have outside of Patrick Queen. So I'm gonna go with the Browns third and the Ravens fourth, just because I am not sold at all on the Ravens depth. They have Patrick Queen and nobody else.
See, part of my ranking of the Ravens, defend them being second, again, it's all mashed together for me, is the Ravens always seem to get solid inside linebacker play out of lesser talents.
True.
So I always look at it and I'm like, yeah, but they're gonna play like a Raven. They're gonna do it. They're gonna
develop it.
Give you a certain amount of competence, and I'm not confident we're gonna get that from the Browns at all. I am a Browns hater. I'm coming out today as a Browns hater. You can all roast me if you want to, but deal with it. I don't like this Browns team. I think they're highly overrated and they're gonna have a terrible season. But moving on from inside linebacker, let's go to cornerbacks. Despite injuries, some drop-off things, I've got to still put the Ravens number 1. with Marlon Humphrey. When he's healthy, he's absolutely dominant. He just locks people down. They play him in the slot, which is if you shut down slot receivers in the NFL today, you're going to win football games, and that's what Marlon Humphrey does. They still got Marcus Peters out there. He's still not bad. He's not playing badly yet. He has his moments. He can be beaten, but he's pretty good. They've got some other guys out there that are pretty decent. So I'm going to go with them number one. For me, the Bengals are number two. I can't rate too highly any cornerback room with Eli Apple, even though he seems to have found a good, place there. Chidobe Awuzie, solid starter, solid number one, maybe. I don't know. I'm not sold on this. Mike Hilton, great part of that defense for them. He actually had a very solid season last year. Was good for them. I'm going to go Steelers number three because we don't have a number one. Our system doesn't really require one, in my opinion, the way we run our defense and the fact that we have Minkah Fitzpatrick and the addition of more safeties. I think the Steelers are going to keep up with the system they've been running where they don't rely on cornerbacks too heavily to make their plays. Inside, it's kind of a jumbled mess. Like we kind of know the outside corners. There's three of them. We got Cam Sutton, we got Levi Wallace, and Akella Witherspoon. But inside, who's playing where? Right? Who's playing what? Who's our nickel? We didn't really have a good nickel last year. So we'll see how that goes. So I have the Steelers third, and then I have the Browns fourth because I'm a Browns hater. And I don't Newsome was good last year, but even he wasn't that like number one. And Greedy Williams, I'm not sold on at all. I just don't think they have much there other than Greg Newsome.
Yeah, I pretty much agree. I'm gonna put I'm gonna put the Steelers fourth. This one barely, and the Browns are really close. I don't see a ton of upside with what the Steelers currently have. But I wanted to ask you. I know that Joe Hayden and stuff. Obviously, he was excited about hitting the open market and didn't get the interest that he was hoping for. And I'm writing an article about the top free agent available that this could potentially fit the Steelers. You mentioned about the Steelers not having great options at nickel. At least they didn't last year. And I know that's the safeties may come down some and, different things, but what would you think of bringing back Joe Hayden on a team friendly deal, a smaller contract where he could, even at the worst case scenario where he just is completely falling off a cliff, he's just kind of what I call a ploach. He's half player, half coach, but really more a coach than anything else at that point in his career. But what would you think of him playing in the slot for the Steelers?
Well, everyone remembers like Deshae Townsend when he was too old to play outside and he went in the slot and he just made plays. He made some serious plays. Joe Hayden doesn't have the skills to play out, doesn't have the athleticism and physical stuff going on now to play at his age outside like he used to. We saw him returning from injury and he was not the same player. And yet he made some big plays. Joe Hayden, if he was willing to come back and be a nickel corner, I think he would be fantastic at it because you can protect him like you protected Mike Hilton, where you rarely had Mike Hilton having to cover a guy from, his release off the line to a deep route, right? If that happens, Joe Hayden passes him off and you're fine. He's not going to be out there on an island asked to cover in man on a good receiver like he is, like you have to be when you're outside guy. Like when you're the starter outside, you're going to be in those situations. He could no longer really do that as well at the end of the year. I think he'd be great. I question whether he'd be willing to do it. That's where I question. The guy's made a ton of money. He has made so much money and he has a lot of pride. And I don't know if he would take that, but if he was willing to, in a heartbeat, I would overpay for him because that's a guy that makes plays and he makes big plays. I mean, game-saving tackles, game and clinching tackles, he breakups in the end zone. He is a guy that made game-changing plays for us well after he was no longer a true number one cornerback. put him in that position, man, I think he'd be fantastic. And he'd give us a couple of plays where you could point and say, hey, Joe Hayden might have been the guy who won us, was the difference in a close game between a win and a loss with a big play. Joe Hayden's that kind of guy. I would love to bring him back in that capacity.
Yeah, I would as well. I'm going to put the Ravens first, so that would mean Bengals second. So Ravens are definitely first in my opinion. There's quite a drop-off between them and the rest of the division still, despite age and despite injury concerns.
Yeah. All right. So last position here, we're going to cover safeties.
We're not going to rank kickers and long snappers?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we can do kicker.
No, I'm not. No, I'm not.
I think we all know Ravens are number one there, right? Ravens are number two. Steelers probably Ravens number one. Steelers probably number two. I think we can do that.
Probably. McPherson, though, he's looking like a good young kicker with Cincinnati.
Yeah. Well, yeah, he can challenge Boswell when he puts it together for a few years.
Yeah, definitely.
So there you go. There's our special teams right there. Ravens 1, Steelers 2. No one cares about 3 or 4. But for the safeties, with the addition of DeMonte Kazee, the return of Terrell Edmonds, Minkah Fitzpatrick, Steelers are number one here for me. Absolutely number one. I think this safety room, I like it a lot better with the potential to have Minkah Fitzpatrick not have to be a deep safety all the time, right? He's very good at that, but that's not where he is elite. That's not where he's at his best. Minkah Fitzpatrick is an all-pro when he is able to roam a bit, able to read the defense, cut routes off, jump things, and gamble a bit. And I think the Steelers have him in a better position where he will be able to do that more this year. And so the Steelers, to me, are the number one safety room. After that, I'm going to go Ravens. I'm high on the rookie kid. What is his name?
Kyle Hamilton.
Kyle Hamilton. I like him. I know he's not the best athlete, and he's not a guy you want in man coverage on any wide receiver. But, I mean, the Steelers don't put Minkah like that. The Ravens had Ed Reed. They never put him in man coverage on anybody, right? There's players that you just don't do that with. Kyle Hamilton is going to be fine. I like him for the Ravens, and they have some other talents there, so I have them number 2. I have the Browns number 3, and the Bengals. I have the Bengals number 4 because I don't believe Jesse Bates is going to play for them. If Jesse Bates plays for them, they are immediately number 2. Like if they somehow sign him to a deal and he's happy and he's back, they're number 2 and they're pushing the Steelers for number 1. Jesse Bates is that good of a free safety. And he is a true single high free safety. But without him, I'm putting him 4th.
Yeah, if without him, that makes things difficult because I would definitely put the Steelers 1 regardless. But the Bengals would be a close 2. I'm still going to put the Bengals 2, not necessarily just because of Hill, or not because of Jesse Bates, but number 9. I don't think I apologize to Geoffrey because I don't think he's ever going to get all of his Ohio State listeners and Michigan State listeners that listen to the show every week are never going to listen again after tonight. But I mean, Daxton Hill is a monster. I mean, he is exactly what works great for Cincinnati because we're talking about how their outside corners are not good, and we know Hill can come into the slot. But Michigan would even occasionally put him out on the outside. I mean, he has the athleticism to cover receivers on the outside. You have him and Mike Hilton, and then you have a Jesse Bates and a Von Bell, and some other pieces you have at safety. I mean, that is a good secondary overall. Just the ability to move him around all over the place. He can play both safety spots. And, maybe now if Cincinnati does trade Jesse Bates, I don't know. I would still put Cincinnati slightly second, but that's also because I'm not quite as big on Kyle Hamilton. I think he's going to be solid. He's going to be sound. He's going to be a great tackler. He's going to come down. He can help a team's run defense a lot. And he's sound in coverage. He's just not a playmaker. And I've never been the biggest Chuck Clark fan. He just seemed to be kind of like a guy almost like the Steelers with Vince Williams. they kept him around after they lost pieces, and he developed he stepped up into a bigger role and was fine. And Vince Williams was excellent in his role for several years. But Chuck Clark, I mean, he is what he is at this point. I don't think he's gained any better. He's solid, but he's nothing exceptional. I feel like the Bengals just have a little bit more upside overall, and then the Browns, I would probably put last, really knowing that Grant Delpit struggled to stay healthy. They brought in John Johnson. It didn't seem to me, I didn't watch him super closely specifically, but it didn't seem like he was quite as good as what he was with the Rams the previous year. But yeah, so I would go Steelers 1, Bengals 2, Ravens 3, and Browns 4. Is it just me, or are you muted, Jeffrey?
Sorry, I muted. There was some talking going on. I muted it, and I as always forgot that I muted it. So the Steelers, obviously on defense, we have them ranked a lot higher than we did on offense. I'm trying to remember. I don't think we had them at the top of any offensive position. Obviously, we had them at the top of edge and safety, right there at the top defensive line. I think you had them top of the defensive line as well.
Mm-hmm.
That's the team the Steelers have this year. So I want to, before we go, the last question I want to ask you here is, what position group on offense do you feel bears the weight the most of making this offense run? Like, with the talent they have, who is the group that really needs to drive this Steelers offense this year?
I don't think the offensive line necessarily needs to drive it. They just need to be better than they were last year. I think it's the receivers, just because of the amount the Steelers have invested in terms of draft capital. Chase Claypool, it's put up or shut up time. And, George Pickens, obviously he's coming back from an injury, but everyone's raving about, how good he looks in camp. Well, let's see it on the field. We know how fast Kelvin Austin is, and he could be a true deep threat. And, the Steelers have so many pieces. Deontay Johnson, if you think you're worth that much money, let's see you perform when you're not getting 175 targets in a year, because I highly doubt that's going to happen again. So, I think it's up to the wide receivers really to determine the Steelers' success, even more so than the quarterback in some ways. I think regardless of whether it's Kenny Pickett or Mitch Trubisky, you're going to see you're going to have ups and downs. I'm higher on Trubisky than most people, but, I think that the receivers, if they can live up to their potential, they're going to make whoever is under center, he's going to make their job a whole lot easier.
I agree with you there, but I have the receivers second. My number one group is the tight end room, partly because they're going to have to be involved in making the quarterback's life easier, similar to receivers will be. But they also play a big role in this run game working. And in Matt Canada's offense, they're going to play a role in misdirection. They're going to play a role in a lot of different ways. And it's a good group. I think Zach Gentry, Pat Freiermuth, and even Connor Hayward need to step up and be a big factor this year for this offense to really function well. And I think if they can, this offense is going to be significantly better for it. I think they're a major piece here. Here to close us out, Andrew, give us your prediction. Where do the Steelers finish in the AFC North this season?
I'm going to say I'm gonna say second. I think you're gonna have Cincinnati will barely win the division. I think the Steelers can get to 10 wins. I think that it's possible with the Deshaun Watson suspension, with not knowing what he's going to be like after having so much time off. I think there's a lot of unknowns there. And then with Baltimore, Lamar Jackson just doesn't have a whole lot of help on the offensive side of the ball outside of Mark Andrews. So there's a lot of unknowns there as well. So I think I'm confident enough in Mitch Trubisky, if he is the starter, to lead this offense into a state where, if the defense is as good as we think it can be, the Steelers can win games at the end. I mean, Trubisky, there was times, nobody talks about it, but there were several times, maybe not even in the fourth quarter, but clutch drives and situations where Chicago's offense needed to score. That was when he came in big, especially that 2018 year, when he had some pieces around him. He had a good system. He was given a fair shot. He did really well. So I'm confident in Trubisky. I think he's a perfect fit for Matt Canada's offense. his mobility outside the pocket, everything. I just really like the way things are looking for Trubisky.
Okay. For my thing, I gotta ask you here real quick. How far were the Steelers behind the Bengals last season? Do you remember the records? Bengals were 10-7. The Steelers were 9-7-1. They were half a game behind the Bengals, and the Bengals swept the Steelers. Right? So outside of their head-to-head matchup, the Steelers were better than the Bengals with a tougher schedule. I want to start there. I'm going to start there. I think the Steelers' offense is going to be better this year. I think the Steelers' defense is going to be better this year simply because they're not going to have the injuries. They didn't have, like, whoever Miles Jack is, he's going to be better than Devin Bush or Joe Schobert were last year when Devin Bush was hurt. Devin Bush is probably going to be better than either of those two were last year. Even if he's not the guy we want him to come bounce back and be, if he's the guy he was at the end of last season, just more consistently, he's better than either guy we had last year. The defensive line, I don't want to jinx this, but it would be hard to be worse than what those injuries put that defensive line down to. I think the Steelers have a real shot to win this division. I think Cleveland is not going to be good. I think Baltimore still has too many holes and too many issues on their offense. I think their offense is going to do to the Ravens what they did last year to the Ravens, and what the offense of the Steelers has been doing to that team is just not being good enough. It's too easy to stop Lamar Jackson when he's all you have. If you got Lamar Jackson and Mark Andrews and that's it, he's too easy to stop. You have to put more around him than that. So for me, man, if the Bengals have a letdown year, which if Jesse Bates is not on that defense, I think they'll have a letdown year. I think the Steelers could very easily steal this division, but it would be a steal. Bengals have to be the favored to win the division, but I think the Steelers are second with a good chance to steal the division from the Bengals and be back on top of the North. I'm not a fan of Cleveland or the Baltimore Ravens. Not a fan of either of their teams, really. So for me, I think there's a good chance Steelers are second or possibly even first. Andrew, let the people know what you have coming, they can read from you, plug your shows, whatever you want to do.
Well, on the Steelers Fix, we're just talking a lot of fantasy topics as of late. A couple weeks ago, we interviewed the fantasy headliners. Very good show if you want to go and listen to that. They gave great insight on some of the Steelers players in fantasy football. And then on the website, going to be coming out with, as I mentioned earlier, I believe I have the top 5 free agent fits for the Steelers, just looking at guys the Steelers could potentially afford. I just came out with a piece on Tyrell Crosby, just a kind of a low-risk, high-reward guy I think the Steelers should bring in. But just be going to check that out, just some free agent stuff. We'll be diving into some more fantasy and even a little bit of early NFL draft stuff throughout the season as things unfold, giving some updates on whose stock is rising and whose is falling.
All right. For me, I don't know what I don't think I have anything finished right now. I just had a bunch of articles come out already this week. Make sure you check those out. The Vertex came out. I've been really looking into the language of the report for Deshaun Watson. I had an article on that come out. I'm looking at I'm looking at the Brian Flores situation with the Dolphins and seeing what that's going on. We'll see if any of those turn into any more articles. But just thank you for being with us. For those in the live chat, thank you for being here. I know we came on late because my normal co-host Shannon White, if you missed the start of the show, had a family medical emergency. Andrew was able to come on with us, but couldn't make it at our normal 8:30 time. So thank you, Andrew, for coming on. Kind of a last-minute addition to the show. Came on, did a great job for us. Our thoughts and prayers are, of course, with Shannon White and his family. Hoping the best for you guys. And for everyone who came and was here in the live chat, thank you for being here. Thank you for participating. We love getting your comments. And for everyone listening at home, thank you for listening. Make sure you are listening to all of the Behind the Steel Curtain family of podcasts, clicking over to behindthesteelcurtain.com as we progress through training camp and get ready for preseason start next week. Again, next Wednesday, we start know your enemy, looking at the Seattle Seahawks ahead of the Steelers' first preseason game. Again, thank you all for being here. Have a great week, and let's go Steelers.